Hello and welcome, dear viewers. I am Ellie, one of your hosts, and welcome to all of the new viewers, and welcome back to all returning viewers. We really do appreciate all of you. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different, as it's been so long since our last episode, and a few things have changed. I'm going to start off with a little bit of news, and then go on into the crafting. To start with, let's address the obvious. Where is Morag? I have some bittersweet news. My mother is no longer living with me. Wow, that actually really happened quite a while ago, and I can't believe I'm only letting you know about it now. My parents have got their own place, which I know is wonderful for them because they can really make it into their home now. And it's also nice for me now that I have a proper spare room for any friends or family that come visiting from afar. But I do really miss having my parents so close. They're not that far now, to be fair. They're about half an hour's drive away from my home, so we do visit them quite often. But my mom and I have decided that we will continue the episodes with me doing them on my own, and then she will join me every now and again when we have a visit together and we decide to film. This also suits us because I am a faster knitter crocheter than she is, so I often have more to talk about than she does, so she can kind of build up a stash of what she wants to show, and then we can kind of do it together every now and again. The next obvious thing, where is my face? We've had the coldest week here. Like, honestly, I think it's the coldest that I can remember since we moved to the UK. Yesterday it was minus 5 degrees Celsius, and it was real feel minus 13 degrees. I did not let the cats out, and they were very upset about that. So, to be honest, I do not have the motivation to wash my hair and try and look presentable for everyone. So I'm just going to show photos of my projects and do a voiceover. It should be noted that I live in a wonderful old house, which is really beautiful, but it's also really hard to heat. So we only heat the actual rooms that we're in. And with this recent cold temperature, my oil heater has not been able to keep up with the cold. And yesterday, my craft room only got up to 13 degrees in the evening. So, like, during the day, it was colder than that. It was only, like, 4 p.m. we got into double digits. So, yeah, just not much motivation for me to do anything other than watch YouTube and knit. But if you want to see what I've been up to since the last Tea with Mother and Me episode, which I just can't believe how long ago that was, then check out my last or latest video that I posted called Where Have I Been? I'm not going to rehash that now, as I'm sure a lot of you have actually already watched that. But if you haven't and you're interested, then you can go back and see that. But I've been doing quite a bit of stuff. So yeah, let's just jump straight into finished objects. So my first thing that I want to talk about is my Musselburgh hat. So a while back, honestly, it could probably even be years ago now, I saw the Musselburgh hat knit by Natalie, aka Knitty Natty. I'll put a link below. She's on YouTube. And the pattern is actually by Isolde Teague, and I really loved the smaller stitches and how it looked quite similar to a lot of store-made hats. So I have an issue with beanie style hats. Like, I really like to wear them, I like the style, but my head is quite small and my hair is straight and it's quite smooth, so they tend to kind of like pop off the back of my head. I'm okay with tam o' shanters because they don't really have a lot of negative ease, so they don't like squeeze onto your head, but beanies usually have a fair amount of negative ease, so I just seem to have an issue with it. So finally, in August of this year, 2024, in case you're watching from the future, I decided to purchase the pattern and knit it. I had considered just making up like a similar pattern for myself because it's quite a simple construction, but then I thought I'd actually like to support like a fellow pattern designer and take the hard work out of the equation for me, and honestly the price of the pattern is like not that much. It's not more than going out for a coffee at a restaurant or whatever, so I thought I would do that. So I knit mine out of Woo Sheep's Dennis in the color Dilly Dilly, which is this lovely purple color. It's not quite solid, it's like a semi-solid, like there's a slight variation in the color, but it's just a really lovely like blue purple. And I also knit it out of the Lily Rose in the color Evening Primrose, which is quite a, it's still like overall pink, but it's like kind of on a whitish whitish base with like some darker flecks in it, and that's much more like speckled. But I wouldn't, it's not like self-striping or anything, but it's a really nice color. And these are both about 400 meters to 100 grams, so they're both 4-ply. And the Woo Sheeps is 100% Polworth, and the Lily Rose is 75% wool, 25% nylon. And I knit the hat with 3.5mm needles, and I finished it 4 days later. It was a very quick and enjoyable knit. The pattern was very clear and easy to follow for me, and she uses a lot of tables to give instructions for different sizes, and I really like that format. So I actually struggle with patterns, but following other people's patterns, I always want to change them, but this one I didn't change. I absolutely loved it. And I knit mine as a split color, so half the beanies in one color and half the beanies in the other. But there are instructions in the pattern for different color methods if you are interested. And I absolutely love the finished hat. I wear it so much. The double fabric is just so wonderful. I think this is the first time I've really worn anything. So it's not double knitting. You don't knit it like that. You knit it as like a large, almost like a pill shape, like a tablet shape, and then you push it inside out, so then it goes, or not inside, you push the one side into the other, so then it becomes like a hat shape, and it is then it's double thick, and I really liked that very much, and it fits snugly on my head without like popping off the back, but I can also adjust the folded brim so it doesn't like come too far down over my eyes or anything. So I really love the hat, and it's so fun to knit. It's a great, like, if you ever find that you're knitting socks for like car knitting or movie knitting, or I know some people do movie knitting, and you find that like getting into the heels or the toes or the cuff or whatever is like distracting, you just want to do straight knitting, then this pattern is great for that. There's a lot of straight knitting. And my next finished object were some short tabbed socks for me. I had enjoyed knitting the double thick hat so much, and I needed some summer socks, so I decided to experiment with some tab socks that kind of looked, I think I would say they're similar to like commercial sports sock, where like the cuff has like this little tab at the back behind your heel. And I had tried following a pattern, but I landed up ripping it out because I didn't like the way that they did the short rows for the tab. So I made up my own pattern, which is like, this is just a running theme for me. Unless I'm test knitting for someone, I find it hard to follow patterns and not change something. The yarn I used was also from my stash, so I didn't buy anything for this one. I used some, because, sorry, just to interrupt myself, because they're short socks, I didn't need like a whole full ball, which is why I could just use out of my stash that I already had. And both of the colours are West Yorkshire Spinners. I used Dusty Miller, which is the grey colour, and Penny Royal, which is the purple colour. They are also 400 meters per 100 grams, and the wool is 75% wool and 25% nylon. And 35% of that 75% wool is Blue-Faced Leicester, which I really love. I really like Blue-Faced Leicester as a breed of sheep for knitting with. And I knit them on 2.5mm needles, magic loop style. And these were knit in August, so I didn't have much chance to wear them, but I'm hoping that they will fit better than the rolled sock style. I find the rolled cuff, if it's like a short cuff and it's rolled, it just slips under my heel and it doesn't stay up. So I will report back on that in the future once I've actually worn them some more, but they're not really something I'm wearing in winter. Next, I have a crochet shawl that I'm not actually sure what I'm going to do with the finished project. I made it thinking I was going to enter it into my village show until I realized that they did not have a knitting or crochet category this year. I had already made a decent start on it, so I decided to just finish it anyway. I will probably end up donating it somewhere if I can find somewhere that will take it. I've had a lot of problems donating items in the UK. I just find that a lot of places, they say they can't take things unless they know like exactly where it came from, and it has to have like labels attached for safety and all sorts of things. And also, like, even if they want to donate it overseas to like war-torn countries and stuff, then apparently something to do with like EU regulations, like it all has to have like labels and stuff. And it just makes it really difficult for me to donate. So I'll probably keep it. I'm going back to South Africa next year to visit family for birthdays and stuff. And I find in South Africa it's much easier to just donate items there. So I'll probably do that. So yeah, back to the shawl. So I used a pattern called Count My Blessings Shawl by Ursula Wood, and I did actually follow this one. I used James C. Brett Twinkle Fashion Double Knit in shade TK2, and I used Hayfield Bonus DK in shade Aqua, and I used Stylecraft Special DK in shade Empire. And you'll notice I used all acrylic yarns in this because I didn't know who it was going to end up with, and a lot of these people these days just want to throw things in a machine wash. Like, if you are donating things and people are receiving them, they're not necessarily thinking like, oh, I'm going to get a handmade item. And especially if someone was like homeless or something, then they can't necessarily just go do hand washing. So I just decided that I should make it out of acrylic because it will probably just be better for someone who is not sure, like doesn't know they're going to receive it. Sorry, that was a bit of a weird thing. Anyway, so the yardage is 294 meters per 100 grams, so it is a double knit, and I used a 4.5 millimeter crochet hook. And I will admit that the bobble edging was a pain to do, but once I had done it, I was actually so pleased that I had. Like, I was not happy the whole way through. I was thinking, why am I doing this to myself? It's taking so long. But once I'd done it, it actually looked so good. I'm glad I did do it. Then we have my next finished object was a decorated hat. So having discovered that there was no knitting or crochet category for my village fair this year, I decided to weasel my way into another category. And there was a decorated hat category, and I figured I could probably do that in crochet. So I made up a base like beanie pattern in crochet. I decided to use crochet because it's more stable and it's easier to sew things onto. I find that if you sew things onto knitting, at least in my experience, I find it's more difficult to not have it pucker and get kind of weird. So yes, I made up the pattern and I used Stylecraft DK 100% acrylic because, again, we can choose to leave the items at our village fair for auction at the end, and they raise funds for the village and charities and things. So I decided I wanted to do that, and again, I didn't know if the buyer would maybe have wool allergies or, again, possible washing issues. So I decided I would just, although that being said, I don't know how the decorations will stand up to being washed, but anyway, it is acrylic so that there's no wool allergy issues. So once I'd made the base, I crocheted a bunch of like flowers and embellishments, and I sewed them on along with some felt and some beads. And I was quite happy with the finished thing, and I actually placed first in that category, so I guess my risk paid off. I did manage to get my my crochet knitting in there. My next finished object was actually some short summer socks for husband. He has said to me that he has enough long socks now, which is probably true. He has about 22 pairs. I think maybe one or two of them might need retiring soon, but actually none of them have holes. It's just two of them, I didn't knit them out of the greatest yarn, and so they've kind of lost their shape. But anyway, he said that he would like some more short socks that he can wear in summer. And he has in the past enjoyed the ones I've made with a rolling cuff for him, so that's what I did. And these were knit with Malabrigo yarn in the color 136 Sabiduria. Sabiduri? I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I believe it is Spanish for the word wisdom. And they are 402 meters per 100 grams, and they are 100% superwash merino. So this was a slight mistake on my part, as I didn't check the label properly when husband chose them. It is actually a pet peeve of mine in knitting that some companies use sock and 4-ply interchangeably as a yarn category, which I disagree with. I'm not saying that you have to knit socks with a nylon blend, and I'm not saying that you can't knit them with superwash merino. But it's misleading for beginners. I believe that when you want to make socks, you should start with a wool nylon blend, and once you're happy with your socks, you can then experiment with what kind of wool you want to use. Personally, I can wear 100% merino socks because I'm largely sedentary and I'm not actually very hard on my feet when I do walk. My husband, on the other hand, has to regularly replace his shoes because he's worn through them. So I have my doubts about how these socks will last for him. If I wanted to knit him 100% wool socks, I would actually choose Blueface Leicester or something more hard wearing. So if you are new to the world of wool, merino is a very soft, lovely yarn. it's got quite a fine micron. That means that the thickness of each like hair, as it were, is very thin. And the staple length is quite short, which just it makes a really soft, lovely yarn. But the problem is that because it's fine and short, it doesn't make a very durable yarn. Whereas something like Blueface Leicester has a slightly thicker micron, and it has a longer staple length, which means that it's more hard wearing. So obviously you don't want the thickest and the longest, so it's super hard wearing, but then it's super scratchy and you don't like it. But you kind of want to find like a middle ground where it's hard enough wearing for something like socks, which are going to take a beating, whereas like 100% merino is like perfect for like scarves or hats or things that are not going to get a lot of abrasion. But this is really something you need to find out for yourself. However, when people use the term sock meaning 4-ply, then it kind of, for people who don't know that they need to do some research and make a decision for themselves, they think that this company is telling them that this is definitely appropriate for socks, which I would argue that 100% superwash merino is only appropriate for socks for some people, and you need to find out. But anyway, long story short, I've knit these socks for husband, and we will find out how well they wear. He hasn't really worn them because I did knit them in late August and the weather had already started to turn cold. But yeah, we will find out, and I will report back to you and let you know. Next, we have husband's blue jumper. So this project, actually, the inception of it was quite a long time ago. I actually started spinning for this in January 2023. Some of you may remember, I'm sure I've shown this like little bits here and there on this podcast for a while. Basically, I had got a advent calendar, a spinning advent calendar, so I think I got it was 10 grams a day for 24 days or whatever. And I'd really been enjoying doing just like that little bit of spinning each time throughout December. And so in January, my husband discovered that you can order blends of merino from Wingham Woolworks. So what he did is you can actually choose your colors and ask them to blend it for you. So he got to name it and everything. He called it Then We Take the Blues, and we ordered quite a lot. We landed up ordering, let me just check my notes. Yeah, so we ordered 1 kilogram of merino yarn, because we would probably need about 600 to 700 grams for his jumper. However, the custom blends were only available in 500 gram bundles, so we had to go for 1,000. So I started that in, I think, about January 2023. But that took me a long time, and I do not spin as fast as I knit, or nearly as often as I knit. So I actually only finished spinning that this year, sometime around August. And then I started knitting, and that just knit really quickly for me because I had my spinning, I spun it a bit chunkier, so it was like between a DK and an Aran weight. It was 100% merino. I didn't spin it that tightly, so that obviously will have future implications. We'll get to that. But yes, so I knit it on 4.5 millimeter needles. Husband had actually already designed the jumper. We decided to go for something quite simple, just a raglan shoulder with no cables. He had said in the beginning he wanted cables, but then I pointed out that the yarn itself has quite a bit of variegation and kind of mottling, and I didn't think that the cables would really stand out, and they would probably detract from the colors themselves. So we decided to go for something simple just to kind of really showcase the yarn itself. So I have a book called by Anne Budd, which is just a selection of different, like how to do different sizes of and different gauges of different shapes of jerseys or jumpers. And I love that book. I use it all the time for making up jumpers for my family and friends. And so we just used that, and we did a size 44, which is oversized, but he wanted like a big kind of cuddly like winter jumper. And sorry, I'm wrong. We did a drop shoulder construction. That's correct. We didn't do a raglan. We did a drop shoulder construction. I landed up using 643 grams of the yarn that I had spun, and I knitted. I was using a timer. I sometimes like to time my knitting just because it's interesting to me. So I knit it in 36 hours and 41 minutes. But that was not obviously all at once. I started on the 18th of August and I finished on the 31st of August. So that was not, it was over time that I knit it. And I really loved it. I tried it on throughout just to make sure everything was fitting and working. And I think I need to knit myself one. It is just really, really a lovely jumper. The only thing is, like I said, it is 100% merino, and I didn't spin it like super tightly, and so it has been pilling quite a lot, and it hasn't even been washed yet. So I'm a little bit nervous. I think it's definitely going to have to be hand washed. I'm not even going to be able to. Sometimes what I do with my hand washing is I hand wash it and then I put it in the machine just to spin dry it before I hang it up. I'm not going to be able to do that. That will agitate this too much. I'm going to have to 100% hand do this thing. So yeah, we'll find out how that goes. I might wait to see how his wears for a while, because he's been wearing it like a lot since it pretty much 31st of August, so September. He's been wearing it a lot, and like I said, it has pulled quite a lot, and it hasn't been washed yet. So we'll find out what happens. But we're very happy with how it turned out, and I think it's a lovely jumper. Next, I'm just going to gloss over this. I did finish a blanket, which I started ages ago, but I have not woven in all the ends, and I haven't taken any proper finished pictures of it, so I'm not really going to touch on that here, but I did have quite a bit of the yarn left over, and it was 100% acrylic, so I was in two minds about whether I should just donate it to, I've got a local area that I've spoken about before, a local place called the Border Scrap Store that I like to donate things to and go purchase things from. So I was wondering if I should donate it there, or I also asked my mum whether my father would like a jumper out of it, because my father has quite a lot of sensitivities to yarn and that sort of thing. We've discovered he's actually okay with merino, so it's not, he doesn't have a wool allergy, he just has like very high sensitivity to anything that might be scratchy, which is strange because honestly I find acrylic more scratchy than merino, but I suppose for a jumper, like, you're wearing it usually over other clothing and things, so maybe that's why he's fine. But anyway, so my mum said yes, my dad would like those colors, and so almost immediately, yeah, I started on the 2nd of September. So I finished husband's jumper on the 31st of August, and then on the 2nd of September I started another jumper, and I started a jumper for my dad. And this, I also used the Ann Bud, and this time I did use a raglan. And it was Style Craft Special DK. I'm not going to list all of the colors because it was just like leftovers from my blanket and I can't remember all of them. But it was basically a selection of like browns and grays and blues. It is 100% acrylic, and I knit it at 5 stitches per inch and 7 rows per inch. I used 4mm needles, and we knit a size 46 because my dad is a tall man. And then I started on the 2nd of September and I finished on the 16th of September. And again, this one took me 36 hours. So let me see. Husband's was 36 hours and 41 minutes. So it's about the same. It's actually slightly shorter. And husband's was 44 oversized and this one was 46. So apparently for that size jumper it's about 36 hours for me to knit. I also this time did a pre-wash and after wash swatch for not just the stitches but the rows, because often I find that I only check for the stitches and then the width is fine, but then after you wash it the length actually changes. But being acrylic, this didn't change at all. think that's everything for my notes for my dad's jumper, but my dad absolutely loved the jumper, so I'm very glad that he enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I could put that yarn to good use. So we're finally into September, trying to catch up here. I knit a pair of Claire de Lune socks for myself, and this was quite something different for me. It was my first time ever knitting colorwork socks. I've been quite nervous about knitting colorwork socks because it changes the stretch. So when you put socks on, they need to stretch and then come back down, like be elasticated and like return to original size to fit and hold onto your foot. However, when you strand the colorwork behind, it changes how it fits. So I had seen a fellow Instagrammer called Erica Eccles, and she did some lovely socks. I believe they were the Pixel Rise socks. And she does quite a lot of color work, and so I said to her, like, oh, I really love those socks. Like, I've never done any before. I'm like quite intimidated by it. And so she recommended the Claire de Lune socks, but she said that the pattern was very well written and good for a beginner color work knitter. Just to add, I have knit color work. I've knit a couple of hats and possibly, no, not a jumper. So, but I'm talking about stranded color work, not intarsia or anything like that, and not stripes. I've done a few hats, so it's not like I've never done any color work before, but this is my first time doing color work, stranded color work socks. So she recommended, Erica Eccles recommended the Claire de Lune socks by the Petite Knitter. So I purchased that pattern, and I was looking at my scraps. I was wanting to do them entirely out of scraps, but then I realized that I didn't have a high enough contrast. So I'm sure a lot of you know this, but what you can do when you're trying to make sure that you have a high contrast so that your pattern shows up nicely, you can take a picture and turn it into black and white, and that will show you whether it contrasts nicely or not. So I landed up I actually purchased, I just went to the shop for this one. I got some West Yorkshire spinners in the color licorice, which is a black, and then I used the scraps for the patterned parts. So that was all about 400 meters per 100 grams. The West Yorkshire spinners was obviously 75% wool, 25% nylon, and the 35% BFL of the wool. And so the interesting thing was the gauge. These socks turned out, they're an experimental pair. They're not I'm gonna wear them at home. I don't think I'd wear them out, not because they look bad, but because they might not feel the best. So I got 36 stitches per 9 centimeters and 33 stitches per 10 centimeters, because I changed things up. I knit the two socks differently, which was probably a problem. So I started these on the 17th of September, and I finished them on the 25th of September. I knit the one sock was 72 stitches, so I should preface this in that when I knit straight stockinette, when I'm not doing stranded color work, I use 64 stitches. But again, I told you, we're going to have an issue with the gauge where it's not going to be as stretchy when you do color work, so you have to go up. In actual fact, it's actually going to pull in a bit and be smaller. So you need to go up some stitches. And I was kind of experimenting with what worked for me. So I landed up, for the first sock, I did 72 stitches. And that was just a bit tight. It was fine, and probably would be fine, because over time socks do get a little bit bigger and baggier, so it probably would have been fine. But for the second sock, I decided to do it in 80 stitches. Now, because of the color work repeat, usually you're not necessarily limited on what number of stitches you have, but because you're doing a repeat in the color work, I had to go up in multiples of 8. Which is why I went from 72 to 80. 80 is probably a bit on the big side. So the total time I took to knit this was 20 hours and 12 minutes, but I don't feel that that's a fair reflection, because I did a lot of pulling out and changing things and whatever. So if I knit these again, it would be interesting to see the difference in time. I still knit these on 2.5mm needles, which is my standard for socks. So basically I just decided that the smaller sock was too tight, so I'd try the larger sock. But what I didn't think about was that if you have more stitches, it's going to take you longer to decrease. So the toe and the heel were too long. I'm trying to think how to explain this, especially if you don't do knitting. Basically, one of the problems was that it was an afterthought heel. So usually what I do is I knit the whole sock in one go, and you can try it on as you go along, so you can see, oh, I'm getting to about where I need to start the toes, I'm good. But because you only add the heel in afterwards, it's very hard to measure. And so that is something I would change. If I knit colorwork socks again in the future, I would probably knit the heel in as I was going, and just adjust the pattern. If it was an afterthought heel pattern, I know how to adjust that. I would just adjust it, which means that I could then measure better when to start the toes. Because basically I started the toes too late because the circumference was larger, because I always decrease to 28 stitches for the toes, and I think I did the same for the heel. But basically what that meant is that decreasing from 72 stitches to 28 over, like, you do it every second row. This is going to be very confusing for non-knitters, sorry. But for knitters, you'll know that you have to decrease at the same rate. Otherwise, you can't decrease all at once, otherwise it'll be very strange. And so basically it landed up longer. And so basically they don't really fit very well. The one is probably 2 sizes too big. The other one is fine. So that's why I'm saying, like, I might actually have, either I would just stick to the 72 stitches and it would be fine, or if I was gonna go up to 80, I would have to knit the heel first. Sorry, this is very long. I feel like this is very boring. It was interesting to me. Sorry. But yes, they are beautiful. I love them. I'm very sad that they're not perfect, but I'm also very happy that I've at least, that's the whole point of knitting something for the first time, is that it's not going to be perfect, but then you've learned for next time and your next socks can be closer to perfect. And in terms of the color work, I'm very happy with my color work. I think it looks neat, it looks nice, and it doesn't feel too tight. I can wear it properly. But the big thing for anyone trying colorwork socks for the first time is to remember to do, remember that you've got to increase your stitches. You can't do your standard stockinette, like non-colorwork stitch count. And then we're now moving on very close to Christmas knitting. So next project was Christmas knitting, so I'm not going to talk about that. And then we have a pair of socks for my dad. These were my whole family, not whole family, my mom and my dad, my husband and I all went to the Scottish Wool Festival, which is in Perth, and we had a great time there. I've actually already done a video showing you everything I got, and so these were knit with some yarn that I got from there. So I actually started these on the 11th of October, the 8th of October, and I finished on the 11th of October. They took me 15 hours and 44 minutes. I knit them as like a standard stockinette sock, and they are knit with the yarn by Quack, and it is called "This Is How Liberty Dies to a Thunderous Applause," and that is a quote from Star Wars. And the yardage is 400 meters per 100 grams. The fiber content is 75% merino, 25% nylon. As I've said before, my dad has sensory sensitivities, and so we always use merino wool for him. I knit these on 2.5 millimeter needles, as I usually do, and I used 85 grams of the 100 grams for the socks for my dad, and he really likes them, so I'm very happy with that. The next project is another Christmas project, and we have another Christmas project, and we have yet another Christmas project, and I think that is pretty much it. Everything is Christmas project. The last thing there's another 2 things that I can share with you. The one are some tiny mitts. as I've said in the beginning of this podcast, it has been freezing. And so I was trying to wear gloves, but I still want to knit or crochet or possibly use my computer. And I find it very difficult. I don't like the restriction of gloves. Even fingerless gloves, I find them too restricting on my hands. So my friend suggested that I knit some that literally just cover the palms and like back of my palms of my hands, so like the hand part, not the finger part. I was a little bit skeptical at first as to whether that would actually help with the warmth or whether there was still too much of my fingers exposed, but I decided it would be a very quick project, which it was. So I knit up 2 of those, and actually they have been helping a lot. They are actually really helpful, even though my fingers are still sticking out. So I used Rico Design Essentials Merino Plus DK in the color 012, which is basically a navy. I had this leftover yarn from knitting a jumper for my sister-in-law a number of years ago, and I just had like 2 balls lying around. So I thought 100% wool was a good idea for some gloves that are supposed to keep me warm. And so I just knit. They're very short, but they actually do make a difference, which is amazing. So thank you very much to my friend who suggested that. I did knit these on 4mm needles. Yeah, so I don't know, they're like really tiny. I don't know if anyone's interested in the pattern because they're like super easy. If you're interested in the pattern, I'll make it. I'll probably be free because it is ridiculously easy. But yeah. And then the final thing I made was actually a little gnome for my mom. My mom has decided that she wants to decorate her Christmas tree and decorate for the festive season with little gnomes. And I think as far as I understand, she's wanting to do it over time. So like every year she'll like add 1 or 2 to the collection and let it like slowly grow into a little community of gnomes. So I knit her a little gnome. I was waiting for more. I had to order more yarn for more Christmas knitting, and I was waiting for that to come, and I didn't want to cast on anything big, so I decided to just delve into my scraps and knit this very cute little gnome. I found a pattern by Susan, I'm going to pronounce this in Afrikaans because it doesn't make sense in English, Vettekund, or Vettekind, but that doesn't sound right. Vettekund sounds more like it would make sense. But anyway, I found this very cute little pattern. It's a free pattern, so I will link it down below. And I did make a few kind of adjustments and do my own thing with it as usual. But I'm very happy with how it turned out, and my mother really loves it, so that is what matters. And that is it for all of my finished objects. I can't believe I've been talking for almost 40 minutes about finished objects. I am surprised if anyone is still listening. I am not going to go on to WIPs or works in progress, because pretty much all of my works in progress are Christmas knitting. So they will have to be finished objects that I talk about in the new year after I have given them to people. I'll just touch on briefly, I have been knitting, actually mostly crocheting squares for a charity called Knit a Square, which you can send squares to South Africa. You can either post them just by normal mail, or I'm going over there next year to see friends and family, so I will probably take a box with me. So you can, I know it's called Knit a Square, but they do also accept crocheted squares, and they're supposed to be 20 centimeters, and I was really struggling with my knitting to get 20 centimeters. They were either like 18 centimeters or like 25 centimeters. I don't know, I was just struggling, so I found doing a granny square, where you start in the middle and you work out almost in like a spiral. That made it much easier for me to get it to closer. It doesn't have to be perfectly 20 centimeters, like it will stretch a bit, but you want to be as close to 20 centimeters as possible. And I found it much easier with the crochet, so that's what I've been doing. So that's kind of been my in-between projects. So if I just want a quick something for knitting, for crochet, it takes me about 45 minutes to make one. So if I just want something quick to pick up without like committing to a project, then that has been quite a good in-between project for me to pick up every now and again, and I get to use up my scraps and my stash, which makes me feel really good. I like using up what I've got, especially when it's old leftovers from projects that I don't really have an idea what to do with, then that really works out well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't, like I said, a lot of Christmas gift knitting and crocheting going on at the moment, so I don't want to risk spoiling anything, so I'm not going to go into details on that. But thank you so much for everyone who has still bared with me all the way till the end. I hope it wasn't too boring, especially my deep dive into stranded colorwork knitting for socks. But I had a great time chatting to you all, and obviously a great time knitting and crocheting all of these lovely things. And hopefully I will post again more soon. Although I don't know when that will be, because, well, I suppose it's about a month and then we're almost at Christmas. I can't believe that. But anyway, so then maybe I'll be able to share some things shortly after Christmas. But I hope that you all have a wonderful crafty time, and that whatever you're doing over the December period, you have a lovely time doing that. And until next time, bye!